Hashem Spasai Tiftach Ufia Gitilasacha. We're now in the 6th parak of Hoshea. This parak begins in a positive. What Hashem would love to hear the Bnei Israel say. Hashem, let us go and return to Hashem. Because just like in the last parak where we don't know where all tragedy and all sickness comes from, here we're going to say, oh no, let's go back to Hashem because He's the one that can heal us, because He's the one that struck us to begin with. That He's going to make us well on the 3rd day. The 3rd day is always the worst day after a sickness, or it's the 3rd day of referring to the first galus, the second galus, now the third. Now we're going to be saved from our 3rd galus, or the Bayis Shlishi, the 3rd Beis Hamikdash. The reference here is that 2 are not good, and on the 3rd we're going to be healed. V'neda, and we will know, v'nitravela da'ases Hashem, and we're really going to run after, v'nir defala da'ases Hashem, to run after. From here we know you're allowed to run to do to shul even on Shabbos, but it's also how do we stick with with mitzvos, v'nir defala da'ases Hashem, with alacrity, with jerizus. Then kashachar nachon matzo, then it's going to be as clear as the day what to do and how to do it, because we're going to have something that is so strong inside of us. V'yavo kageshem lanu, and Hashem is going to be like the rain, kamal koshore, which satisfies the whole earth, and either like the rain, but the rain has some negative elements to it because sometimes we don't want rain, but dew, on the other hand, very easy, but it has its disadvantage because sometimes it's not enough. So we'll have both. Okay, but that's the good part. The bad part is what actually happens when instead we say, Ma yaselecha Ephraim, what did you say, Ephraim and Yehuda? Kachasdechem ka'anan boker, that your chesed was like a fleeting cloud, ukatal maskim holech, and like the dew, not so good. Al kain, and therefore, chapatzti b'neviim, I gave you leaders to try to get you back on the derech. That time where it's Yom Kippur and everything is good and you have this sense of holiness and connection to Hashem, and then it fleets. So I gave you Nevi'im, I gave you leaders, but what did you do? Haragtim, you killed them, like Zachariah or Uriah, that you killed in cold blood. Or the people during the time of Achav, remember, they killed the Nevi'im, that's why Obadiah had to hide them. And because you didn't want what they had to say to come out. Now, ki chesed chafatzti. Here is a big kicker. Here's our lesson. V'lo zabach. I don't want your sacrifices. I want your chesed. Chesed, olam chesed yibanet. Your acts of kindness and goodness. That's what I want. I don't want sacrifices. The Gemara talks about that when the 2 big rabbis saw the Chorban, they said, how are we ever going to be forgiven? And the 3rd rabbi said, how are we going to be forgiven? No, just do chesed, that's enough. That and v'das elokim malalos. I would rather have das elokim, learning Torah, understanding Hashem's ways, rather than more karbanos. What do I need karbanos for? Karbanos are just there as a way to self-sacrifice. But if you can self-sacrifice in a truer way between people, that's what I really want. Behema ka'adam avru bris sham bagdubi. And instead you were like Adam. Adam Arishan had everything. He was in Gan Eden. And yet, what did he do? He defiled the bris that he made with Hashem, and it was treacherous, and it didn't work. So too, you're going to be kicked out of the best life that you could possibly have, out of Eretz Yisrael, out away from the Beis Hamikdash. Gilad and Kiryat Polei Aven Akuba Midam. What is that? That refers to the people of Yabesh Gilad when there was a terrible situation where they got killed with the Bnei Yehuda a long time ago, and the all of the situations that created where Jews were murderers. That's not something that is really part of our mahus, but every once in a while in history, or the Chaver Kanim the Kohanim that were killed, and Derech Yarutzu Shchema, and what happened in Shechem. We have all of those references, Ki Zama Asu, because you did, again, the Zima, this, you were devised a plot to go against Hashem. There have been times in Jewish history that it was really terrible, and there was a lot of murder, and murder is not something that HaKadosh Baruch Hu ever looks upon favorably. Beis Yisrael Ra'iti Sha'aruah Sham Znus LaEphraim Nitma Yisrael, and again, the Beis Yisrael, you did Znus. He continues to go Znus, either Znus or Avodah Zarah, and Yehuda as well. And the last part of the parak, just to understand, this is a short parak that really gives us an idea of what HaKadosh Baruch Hu really wants. Hashem says, I don't want, first of all, the beginning of the parak tells what the ideal situation is, and that's wonderful. But Hashem says, just acts of kindness is what's going to make this all better. You have to acknowledge Hashem, Ladas Hashem. There's Da'as Hashem. There's Chesed of Hashem, and then there's learning Torah, Emes of Hashem. And those three things together are really what Hashem wants. But the running theme has a lot more to do in this parak with Bein Adam L'Chaveiro, between man and fellow man, because Hashem says, if you self-sacrifice, then I can understand where you're coming from. You're negating yourself, and it's not ideal, it's not to me, but at least you're doing something that resembles me, that could look like me. And then I can understand, the end of the parak ends, B'shuvi shivusami, when I return of the backsliding of my people. So if you do that, then I can come back, because then there's something to work with. And so we have that. Just as an aside, like what is there to do, the takeaway. So the takeaway is obviously to do chesed, but also to see la da'as Hashem. How do we see da'as Hashem in our lives? There's some people that look for it. We have the hashgacha pratis, moments of the day. People even have a notebook that have that written form, and then they share it on Friday nights, at the table. It's important that if you see two things, if you do it bizrizus, if you do it with alacrity and excitement, then it stays, because it doesn't fleet, as we see in this parak. Otherwise it fleets. And if it's consistent in your life, it's just part and parcel of your life, then Hashem says also, then it's not going to go anywhere. Otherwise, we, just like in the beginning of the parak, we started off strong but didn't end up that way. So too, it's the backsliding is really there. The potential for backsliding is there. And so it's not just that it happened during Hoshea's time, and that it was a function of one king was good, and then one king, then there was a Menashe, and then there was, then one king was good, and then was an Achab, but rather it really is Ladoros. It's for us to take away and to understand that in our lives there are moments of inspiration, and then there are moments where we are no longer inspired, and to hold steady with consistency, especially in chesed and in trying to get closer to Hashem, in understanding His ways in our life, is the way to make sure that it is not fleeing.